Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is JAE LEE Tuesday, so we're looking at the next issue of his Namor the Sub-Mariner run from the early 90s. Sub-Mariner, right? I think is probably better, sounds better. I would say Sub-Mariner, actually. So this is issue number 33, cover dated December 1992. The tagline, right? I found out at a certain point back in the day, Marvel's first and mightiest mutant. So Namor officially, I guess, is Marvel's first mutant, although I do believe that's a retcon. Interesting cover here. I've talked about the Bisley influence, obviously, with JAE LEE. I see it here in the way he kind of draws the fist in profile. If you go and look at some of those Lobo's back issues or just regular Lobo miniseries by Simon Bisley, you'll notice this exact kind of rendering of the hand. So it's, pretty much lifted from there. Pretty cool kind of shot overall, I gotta say, of someone getting punched in the face and some splatter all throughout. So that helps, reinforce the impact of the shot. And interesting rough textures on the metal here, which in a funny way still evoke the metal texture. So I think that works really well. This issue is called Showdown. Let's have a look inside. Once again, I'll, throw out my hypothesis that JAE LEE is drawing full bleed pages, but that Marvel's still formatting them at this, old school way of always having a white border around everything, which is the way all their comics were formatted until full bleed was available, which became available. I've talked about this before with Rob Liefeld on X-Force had it, and McFarlane not on Amazing Spider-Man. He didn't have it, nor did Rob Liefeld on New Mutants, but they had it on Spider-Man. They had it on X-Force. So JAE LEE, unfortunately, I guess not one of the artists who got the use of that, because when he goes to Image, it's full bleed, because Image is basically full bleed all the way around, unless the artist chooses not to do that. And I talked about before how I think a big part of the Image look, subconsciously, even though most people didn't really notice it took me years. I only realized this lately, that all Image comics just had that full bleed, at least at first, when the original 6-7 guys came out. 6, right? They were all full bleed, as opposed to most Marvel comics not being full bleed, and DC comics as well, right? So there was something to that visual aesthetic that came from that full bleed as well. Anyways, I digress. So we're getting the typical kind of silhouettes that JAE LEE was giving us before with the other inker, but now he's dirtying it up and just throwing splatter in there and, mixing elegance with grit. And, this is the first issue I feel like is pretty comparable to where I really discovered him, which was at Image and when he did Youngblood Strike File. Like, I feel like the art in here is close to or approximately around the same time he was probably doing pages for that Chapel story in Youngblood Strike File. I know he doesn't stay that long on Namor. We've only got a few issues left at this point. So I know there was a time where he was working on both the Youngblood Strike File and Namor. So I think we're pretty close to that or approaching that. I love his rendition of Doom. The way he does these, again, just like on the cover, the metal textures, but in such a rough way. But I just love it. I think it works really well. His use of shadows here. The fact that, like Namorita, we just see her boobs, her rib cage, part of her forearms, thighs here, iron fist as well, and it works really well and it reads really well. You understand what's going on, even though you could tend to think that with art like this and all this dirty, rough lines and stuff, it could get dirty. It could get confusing. It really doesn't. It's always, the storytelling is always very clear. As a kid, if you would, oh yeah, I love the screen tone here all the way throughout. Looks pretty cool, showing the characters that were in shadow on the last page, hence I guess in this case why they use the screen tone. Great silhouettes always, just enough details and fine elegant details. I've used the word before for JAE LEE's art, elegant, but in this issue I'm going to talk a lot about how visceral he gets, and this is one of the best examples probably in this issue of what he does, and he gets how expressionistic he gets and dirty and using white medium. Like most of this, it's red, right, because it's been colored, but this is all white medium or paint he's used with a brush or something, and kind of quickly and roughly thrown that in there, and it looks great. How menacing is that, right? And just some white splatter and medium all the way around. Really cool. And yeah, so what I was saying earlier is, as a kid, if you would ask me, I'm sure I would have said, well, the image coloring is on Youngblood Strike File, for example, is better. But there's something about this that I really like. I don't like. I think maybe these two pages really highlight it, where it's almost like a vampire kind of Dracula kind of vibe with the color scheme and even with the art, right? So I feel like it really works almost like a Castlevania vibe, specifically on these two pages. It's it's pretty strong, but I feel like the darker colors, the green's really dark here, the purples and the blues, these very dark. But it works. I don't know how else to say. Like, it's a little murky, but I think I prefer the coloring job on JAE Lee's art now in this Namor run, and I'm pretty sure that's Steve Buccellato or Buccellato. Let me just make sure I'm not talking out of my ass here. Oh, Glynis Oliver. So I was talking out of my ass. Well, she's doing a great job here. She also did the great coloring on Wolverine with when Mark Silvestri was doing it. So at least for a while, I think. Was it that or X-Force? I'm getting confused. Anyways, Steve Buccellato and Glynis Oliver are kind of like, honestly, my favorite colorists of these late 80s, early 90s period. When the color treatments start getting really good and the printing really tight, this is a good example of that. Looks great. And I guess it helps, with these kind of scenes where the colors are darker, but they're very saturated and they almost glow off the page, which I really like. Again, more of JAE Lee's design sense and that Castlevania vibe here, Smart drawing too. We've talked about deadlines. Like, this is just a repeated pattern. This is probably pretty, quick to draw and work out. Even this silhouette here, this rough silhouette, this page was probably done pretty quickly, but very effective, and the design is excellent. Again, anytime he does a silhouette, it's just so evocative and more signs of his elegance. And listen, every once in a while, this surprised me, this is 4, 8, 12 panels on a page, right? And this is, again, don't you feel like, why would he draw the page to have it stop there, with this black and negative space here, to have then a white border as well? Like, he's putting it in a frame within a frame. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I really feel like, he's definitely doing full bleed. This has been shrunk down, I feel. Really like to know what was going on there production wise. And then we get a 90 staple vertical double page spread. You got to turn around, but I mean, it's definitely worth it for this one. And how great is that, right? Like, listen, let's be honest, very Simon Bisley, but JAE Lee's putting enough of his own kind of touch to it that I think it differentiates it. This is basically Lobo, right? Does Lobo even doesn't he have pointy ears because he's like a bit of a wolf? Like this, I feel like JAE Lee's just doing Lobo here. He's like, fuck it, I'm doing Lobo. And if he just colored the skin tone Lobo's white, that skin tone that Lobo has, this is Lobo. It looks great. Could you imagine JAE Lee doing a Lobo series? That would have been awesome. Why did that not happen? Saw this ad earlier, gotta mention it. Mark Teixeira killing it doing the Punisher. I'd love to see Mark Teixeira do the Punisher. There's gotta be some issues, I guess, out there. This being one of them that he did. Chuck Dixon, Mark Teixeira. It's so rough up here with the coloring and stuff. I'm not sure if that's a ponytail or it certainly looks like a ponytail. The rest of his jacket, I'm not quite sure. It's a little confusing, but still looks pretty cool. Mark Teixeira doing Punisher makes sense to me. The balls of just these quick brush strokes. Sorry, that's the sound it does. But like, and then, very fine, clean kind of inking down here, contour line, and then the way the colors mesh with it. Like I said, the dark choices mixing with the black work really well, just specifically, I guess, in this comic and with JAE Lee's artwork. Just great. Another good example there of just when he goes nuts. All these vertical hatching lines all the way throughout. It's like he's doing his own kind of version of manga art, I guess. Another great shot of Doom, and that just super awesome rough light reflection that he's got going on the armor there, that I just, again, works really well with his style. But it's just the balls to actually do that. And just, you know, there's a bit of Sam Keith there, I guess, almost, with that white medium here. He's really going nuts. You know, most of this is stuff he added after, right? Or like he, you know, did the figure, did all the shadows, and then came back on top of the shadows with the white here and the water, all of that stuff. And just the smart choice of having Iron Fist in the background here, but just the top part here, the yellow, the contrast really pops out, and you don't have to draw the rest of them. And you know exactly what's going on. Is that just a floating bust of Iron Fist? Of course not. You know, you understand he's back there. Economical in the art. Allows him to draw a bunch of pages a day. And allows him to work on Namor and Youngblood Strike File all at the same time. Backgrounds obviously are at a minimum, but I mean, these are all water settings still. And then he just, you know, he does, the line's rough, but it's very, you know, cleaned up. Very contoured, just a few kind of lines to, you know, for detail. Bit of volume. And then rough, again, on this metal texture. Like all throughout this with Doom and with Namor's Gauntlet, I just love the way he texturizes it. So he does just rip this guy's head off. That's pretty heavy metal. Yeah. I remember when I got to this page here specifically, I was like, this is, you know, JAE Lee's version of heavy metal, the magazine. This would fit in there, maybe with a slightly different coloring. Maybe a bit more of a painterly look, but this would, yeah, definitely fit right into there. Good stuff. And of course, introduced to a character who will obviously become a protagonist next issue. She knows with a certainty of heart and a clarity of mind that it is time to seek out the man she once loved, Namor the First, and somewhere a trumpet sounds. Yeah, John Byrne, like I said, is not the reason why I'm checking out these issues. He is still the writer, right? Let's double check that again. Should have read the... he actually is not. Bob Harris is script. JAE Lee pencil and inks. Script, eh? So I guess that means story as well. Well, that's a confusing one. I'd like to know what happened there. Mostly paying attention to the JAE Lee art, so I didn't even notice when John Byrne kind of came off this comic. I guess Bob Harris, I think it's Harris, took over the writing duties. So that is it for my review of Namor the Sub-Mariner, issue number 33. If you are subscribed and you're still watching, thank you so much. I appreciate your support. On the road to 500 subscribers, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Really helps the channel out. Once we hit 500, we can get out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are a little easier. The algorithm's going to help us out a bit more. And those of you who are not subscribed, please do so below. It really helps the channel, helps us grow, as I said. So thank you so much for all your support. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13. 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!